I'd like to acknowledge and thank Commissioner Marissa Navarro of the Department of Housing. As we noted during our City Council session today marks the one-year anniversary for both myself and the entire City Council in taking office. Obviously, there are a number of veteran City Council members, but a number of new City Council members who, like me, are celebrating our one-year anniversary. This year, of course, has been unlike anything anyone expected. But despite all the challenges and changes we've experienced over the last 12 months, I am tremendously proud of the gains we've made as a governing body to expand opportunity and inclusion for all of our residents, particularly those most in need. And as we saw, that work continued today with many measures both passed and introduced. These included the COVID-19 anti-retaliation ordinance, protecting employees from being demoted or fired if they're under quarantine or isolation due to public health orders or staying home because of COVID-19 symptoms. This is an important worker protection. We did this because no one should ever have to choose between their livelihood and the health of themselves, their community during this deadly pandemic. We also passed the Concessions Relief Program, providing O'Hare and Midway concessionaires with assistance desperately needed to absorb the shock of the COVID-19 crisis. This relief will be tailored to the businesses themselves, many of whom are among our city's small and diverse entrepreneurs, through rent deferrals, the relaxation of operation space requirements, along with other measures. We also took a number of actions today to strengthen fair and affordable housing in Chicago. First, the City Council approved the Emergency Relief for Affordable Multifamily Properties Program. This new $3 million package to help stabilize affordable housing developments across our city and keep up to 3,400 of Chicago's residents and families safe and secure during this crisis. We also introduced an innovative new ordinance that will legalize additional dwelling units, thereby expanding housing access for thousands of our residents. These units include basements, attics, coach houses that will serve as moderate-cost rental units, ensuring more equitable access to housing options across our communities, as well as providing welcome financial stability to the owners who own these units, many of whom include our seniors. We also introduced a new ordinance that will provide more stability and predictability for Chicago renters by extending the notice period for non-renewal of leases. Currently, Chicago allows tenants a window of only 30 days to find a new home. That's just 30 days to find a new home that you can afford, that's close to your job and other responsibilities, and make arrangements to move all within that time period. This new ordinance would triple that period to 90 days. Meaning landlords would have to give their tenants 90 days notice before they don't renew or terminate a lease without cause. Established Chicago is having one of the longest notice periods in the country. And to further ensure residents are protected from housing instability, this ordinance also expands protections for tenants forced to relocate to buildings due to building renovations or development. All three of these housing-related measures represent our latest steps to give Chicagoans, especially our low-income residents, the stability and protections they deserve, whether during our current crisis or otherwise. Our future as a city rests on keeping housing in Chicago fair and affordable. It is simply not acceptable that in our city, seniors are struggling to pay their utility bills or that two-income families are barely able to make ends meet. You heard in the public comments today that many people are hurting in this city. And we know this to be true because they're our friends, our neighbors, our family members. And any hope we have for strengthening our communities and growing our city's population depends on having access to stable and affordable housing. Housing that offers the true foundation for our families to grow and our residents and businesses to thrive. And I want to thank all the city leaders, community stakeholders, and housing partners who work with us on these measures. More work to do, but good partnership to really move things forward in a way that is responsive to the needs of our residents in this important time. And I look forward to continuing our mission in the weeks and months ahead. And now I'll invite Commissioner Navarro to say a few words about some of the initiatives that really were generated by her and her policy team. Commissioner.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, and congratulations on your one-year anniversary.
Thank you.
When you were sworn into office last May, the city already had an extreme shortage of affordable housing units of about 120,000. So Chicago cannot afford to lose any of the affordable housing that we do have. So we're doing everything we can to avoid widespread foreclosures due to COVID-19 with the $3 million Emergency Relief for Affordable Multifamily Properties program approved today. You heard a bit about this from the mayor, but ERAMP provides us the opportunity to help an entire building of Chicagoans in one fell swoop by minimizing the chances that building owners will experience potentially disastrous operating shortfalls, mortgage defaults, or foreclosures that will force their tenants to lose their affordable housing. Department of Housing staff that I work with conducted a survey of more than 80 affordable housing developers about their most pressing concerns during this crisis. And topping the list was loss of rent and keeping their buildings clean and safe throughout this unprecedented time. So we designed EREP to address those very issues. It will support up to 3,400 low-income households in 40 properties across the city with grants or no interest deferred payment loans of up to $75,000 to cover lost rent, general operating expenses, additional cleaning, and so on. ERAMP will also streamline the process for modifying affordable developer loans to ensure the program can act at the speed that the COVID-19 crisis demands. Building on these efforts is the Fair Notice Ordinance that was introduced today. This measure is part of the mayor's commitment to housing justice and to enacting bold, well-rounded, inclusive tenant protections that will create more stability and predictability for Chicago renters. Our work to extend Chicago's tenant renewal notice period started prior to the COVID-19 crisis, but the pandemic makes this policy change even more crucial. While there remains a moratorium on evictions in Cook County, renters whose leases expire or who have month-to-month leases can be forced to leave their homes with just 30 days notice, regardless of if they've paid rent or not. 30 days is simply not long enough for many Chicago renters, including seniors, families, people struggling to get by, to find a new and suitable apartment that they can afford and that meets their range of needs. So fair notice would triple the notification period from 30 days to 90 before non-renewing, a significant expansion of tenant protections that gives people time to save for a move, to find the right place, and to land on their feet, and creating additional stability and predictability for Chicago renters. Fair notice also reflects the input of affordable housing providers and small landlords who talked with us at length about this measure. We believe that fair notice is a fair step forward. And I do want to be clear, this is not an end to our work on tenant protections. This is a first step. It's a down payment on the commitment that the mayor has made. Stable housing is fundamental to a decent quality of life. And finally, to increase stable rental housing options, the mayor today introduced an ordinance more than 60 years in the making, the proposal to permit additional dwelling units, or ADUs, such as attics, basements, and coach houses. ADUs have been illegal in Chicago since 1957. This ordinance is an almost invisible way to increase moderate cost rental opportunities across the city that fit in with the way a neighborhood already looks. And legalizing these units is also part of our affordability strategy. They can have a real and positive impact on homeowners who need extra income as they may be experiencing rising property taxes, and may need to age in place. And half of any ADUs created in any one building, if it's 6 units or more, must be affordable. And through our partnership with the Low Income Housing Trust Fund, subsidies will be set aside to assure that some of these units are affordable to people in our lowest income bracket of 30% of the area median income and below. That's about $27,000 for a family of 4 and below. We will continue to build on these measures every day so that we can fulfill our fundamental obligation to ensure that every resident in Chicago has access to a safe, affordable home. Thank you, and be safe.
Happy to take your questions.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I'm Natalie Perez from Univision Chicago. Let me start with us. Can you provide more details about the select businesses that will be allowed to reopen in Phase 3? And how will they know they are allowed to reopen? Do you send them the okay, or is just broad guidelines?
So we are working on identifying the range of businesses that will be able to open up safely. In addition, as you know, as part of our recovery task force work, we've been working with a lot of different industry sector groups that have been working on specific guidelines for reopening, focused on protecting employees and protecting patrons and customers who may come into those businesses. So that work still continues, but I look forward to making those announcements in the coming days.
Second one, with the weather looking beautiful this week, are you worried about setbacks to reopening plans with more people potentially leaving their homes?
Look, I hope not. Let's put it that way. But I understand that the weather's supposed to be quite beautiful this weekend. And I'll just repeat the admonitions that our public health officials have been giving now for the last eight weeks. The reason why we are making the progress that we're making, for example, seeing cases really flatten, doubling now only every 20 days as opposed to every 2 or 3. The reason that we're seeing a decrease in the number of deaths and flattening there is because of the hard work and sacrifice that so many have made. So if we retreat from that and throw all caution to the wind, we're going to see a setback. And that means we're going to delay a gradual reopening that I think is on the horizon. So my hope is that people will celebrate the holiday weekend, but do it safely and do it at home.
Mayor, last question from Univision. Can you provide an update on the Hillcomb demolition? When will it take place? And do you plan on having additional community input before it does take place?
Well, as I've said before, there's a couple things that are important. Number one, I understand and realize entirely that the community of Little Village has felt under siege for a very long time, and that people in that neighborhood in particular feel like their voices have not been heard. But what I also know is that the building that is subject to demolition is dangerous every single day that we let that building stay up. We took the measures of closing the northbound lanes of Pulaski Road because we feared some kind of collapse of that building on its own, and we wanted to make sure that we took the precautions to protect motorists. The building is dangerous. It's structurally unsound. I don't think there's any disagreement about that. We continue to engage with members of that community. We held 2 different community forums earlier this week. There's another one that is planned for this Saturday, and we're being very transparent in saying the building is dangerous, it poses a risk to public safety and public health, and it must come down, and we continue and will continue to engage with residents of that community.
Okay. This question is from Gregory Pratt from Chicago Tribune. Governor Pritzker talking about the state possibility moving from Phase 2 to Phase 3 on May 29. Is the city on Phase 2 advance with the rest of the state? And do you have criteria yet for how the city moved from 3 to 4 and to 4 to 5 under your rules?
Well, first things first. We're in Phase 2. We set out very specific metrics that we believe that we needed to meet. We announced those now almost 2 weeks ago. Of course, they are geared and grounded in public health metrics. The number of ICU beds overall, the number of COVID-related patients in ICU, the percent positivity rate, and other health metrics that, as we've been saying every day since, that we are moving closer and closer to meeting. And we'll assess at that time, if the stay-at-home order is lifted, where we are and whether or not we feel as a city that we can move forward in opening things up. We're certainly planning for that on a number of different fronts with businesses, with not-for-profit organizations, with the faith community, and with city government. All of those plans are underway, and they have been for quite some time. And if we reach that point where we believe that we can reopen safely in the next phase, then we'll get there.
Okay. This question is from Spillman from Chicago Sun-Times. The Chicago Teachers Union is suing Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and CPS over new special education regulations that the union alleges have created an impossible burden for school workers during the pandemic and threat to interfere with the student learning. What is your response to that, Mayor?
Well, I don't typically comment on pending litigation, and I won't say much here, but I think the truth of what the reality is will be revealed in time.
Another question from Spillman from Chicago Sun-Times. Last summer, you discontinued the $1.4 billion line of credit established by former Mayor Ron Emanuel to save the $22 million. Are you now planning to reestablish that line of credit? And if so, for what purpose?
No, we're not.
If this is part of your plan to replace the $500 million in revenue that your CFO, Jenny Bennett, told the City Council this week has been lost to the stay-at-home shutdown triggered by the coronavirus?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the first part of the question.
Okay. If this is part of your plan to replace the $500 million in revenue that your CFO, Jenny Bennett, told the City Council this week has been lost to the stay-at-home shutdown triggered by the coronavirus.
First, I don't know that that's what she said, but if the question refers to the previous one, which is reopening a line of credit, the answer is no.
Okay. Moving forward, and I think this is the last question from Mark Guarino from Washington Post. Mayor, any concerns regarding from Chicagoans traveling to Indiana, Wisconsin, or other border states that have looser restriction orders and creating a public health risk when they return back to Chicago?
I have concerns of anyone who is traveling to Chicago from a state that has not been as rigorous in protecting the public from the coronavirus. Absolutely.
Okay.
Mayor?
Other questions?
Yes, over here. From Becky Beebe at WBZ. Mayor, congratulations on your first year in office.
Thank you.
Could you respond to commenters who are saying you haven't done enough to provide rent and mortgage relief to Chicagoans?
There's always going to be people who say that. I think that we have done a tremendous amount. Some of the things that we introduced today are intended to continue to address that. But the magnitude and the size of the problem, and particularly when really what it originates from is landlords needing to pay their mortgages, that relief, as I've said many, many times in addressing this issue, has to come from the federal government. So the lobbying should be there. And we certainly have had extensive conversations with our federal representatives about the magnitude of the problem. I think they understand that, and I hope that we will get the relief so that everybody in the ecosystem, the landlords and the renters, will get some forbearance on what their monthly obligations are. But as I've been very clear about, you can't solve one problem without creating another. So it's got to be a solution that understands the interconnectedness of these two issues.
Similarly, Mayor, still from Becky Beebe, could you comment on your proposal for ADUs?
Well, for ADUs? Yeah, I mean, I think both the commissioner and I think, really address that issue. The point is that in an environment where we have a significant affordable housing crisis, and which has existed for some time, certainly well before I took office, and continues to be a challenge in the city, thinking creatively about ways in which we can open up opportunities for affordability in already existing structures, and then at the same time give another income stream to the owners of those properties, I think is a good thing. Now, we are going to be extraordinarily vigorous in making sure that all of these additional spaces are up to code. There's going to be vigorous permitting and inspection, but I think it offers a measure of relief both for those who are seeking affordable housing as well as those who have the space and need some extra income.
From Carrie Shepard at WBZ. Today is the first day back for library workers, with a targeted date to maybe open June 1st to the public based on the state's plan. You have said libraries absolutely won't open June 1st. What time do you expect them to open?
So let's just be clear here. There was a report earlier that said, I said June 1st. I've never said anything. I don't have a specific time frame in mind. But what I do know from the commissioner is that they needed some time to get library spaces open. And so in that vein, the commissioner indicated that they needed to bring people back to start getting libraries ready to open and be thinking about the kind of protections that needed to be in place so that these front-facing positions, whether it's the reference librarians or otherwise, that they are provided with the kind of equipment and supports that they need to feel like they can safely do their job. That's best done both when they're in the libraries themselves, thinking about the physical space and what the flow and movement are of people through those libraries so they can help them reopen the libraries safely. And when that work is done and we are ready, then we will open, but not before.
Kelly Bauer from Block Club asks, is the city doing anything to enforce the stay-at-home order over Memorial Day weekend? Will it ban parking along parks like it's doing with Humboldt Park this weekend?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question, since we've been doing things to try to get compliance with a stay-at-home order all along.
Question from A.D. Quigg at Cranes. Were you expecting your 90-day renewal ordinance to be kicked to rules? How much does the procedural move delay its passage? And what has been the tenor of your conversations broadly with aldermen pushing for rent relief?
I don't think what the procedural move today derails it or delays it one bit. This is going to be going to committee, and my expectation is it will be passed in June because people need relief. This is an important measure to make sure that renters have the kind of notice they need beyond 30 days to be able to organize their life. I can't imagine what the possible objection would be from aldermen to that. So I believe that we will move forward. We will move forward on track, and I'm looking forward to a passage in June.
Mayor, a follow-up question from Heather Sharon on the same topic. Mm-hmm. Will you revise the proposal?
I have no expectations that the proposal will be revised. This has been the subject of lengthy conversations, meetings, discussions, well before this matter was introduced. There are some that aren't happy with it and don't think it goes nearly enough. But as I said, balance in public policy and governance is critically important, and I think that this measure strikes the appropriate balance and gives a measure of important relief to renters so they don't have to scramble with all their possessions in tow with 30 days notice, which is not nearly enough time when you've got to think about literally moving your life from one physical spot to another. So, and the other thing that it provides is if renters' rights are terminated because of a renovation or demolition, then they are entitled to relocation reimbursement. So I think that those two things, which are in this proposed ordinance, are important for renters in the city, and I look forward to its passage.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I would just like to add that when we began our conversations, and in fact when the mayor spoke about tenant protections earlier this year, we never envisioned that we would be able to accomplish a bunch of changes in one bill. We believed that we would step out and begin to work and begin to hear from people and organize and work over time on a series of reforms. And so it would be a mistake to consider this a one and done approach. This is a step, and it's what we felt we could move forward today. Thanks.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And last question, Mayor, from Amy Jacobson at WIND Radio. Why the apparent change of mind about the lakefront? On Monday, it was a hard no. Now the story in the Sun-Times says you're looking at ways to open up at least parts of the lakefront, which we all appreciate. Did the science change?
There's no change in mind, Amy. I've been in exactly the same place that I've been before. And so let me be clear so you understand. The issue is that we have to follow the guidance of our public health experts on everything, first and foremost. And while I don't believe that it's time for us to open up the lakefront. What I've said is that at some point this summer, the lakefront will open. But it's going to be opening with the input of a lot of different stakeholders, including the aldermen whose wards touch the lakefront from north to south. And it will be done in a way that recognizes that we cannot have people congregating in mass along the lakefront. That's what we saw before I closed the lakefront, where people absolutely fundamentally ignored all the guidance, all the warning, all the cajoling. And so recognizing that possibility, we're going to have to take some very specific measures to limit access and to make sure that there's compliance. And we are working on those plans. And when the public health guidance tells us that we can gather safely along the lakefront, that is when the lakefront will reopen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.